Think back to the last time you were truly deeply bored. I don't mean the kind of boredom where you scroll through 3 different apps looking for a hit of dopamine. I mean the 1990s kind of boredom, the kind where you were sitting in a dentist's waiting room with nothing but a 3-year-old copy of a magazine, or standing at a bus stop just staring at a crack in the pavement for 20 minutes because you had no other choice. If you were born between 1976 and 1985, you didn't just grow up without phones. You grew up in the last era of linear time. We're going deeper than the chronological exhaustion we discussed in my video about psychology of Xennials, why you feel older than you are. In that video, we looked at why you feel like you've lived 2 lifetimes. But today, let's talk about the why behind the what, the biological anchor you have in a world that no longer exists, and why your brain feels like it's constantly fighting an invisible war against a mathematical code it never asked for. There's a concept in psychology called occupational chronicity. It's the way our brains wire themselves to handle the rhythm of life. For Xennials, that rhythm was built on a foundation of high friction. If you wanted to see a movie, you looked at a newspaper. If you wanted to hear a song, you waited 3 hours for the radio to play it with a cassette tape ready to record. If you wanted to meet a friend, you made a plan on Tuesday and simply showed up on Friday, trusting they'd be there. This required a massive amount of cognitive sequencing. Your brain had to build complex mental maps and social contracts just to complete basic daily tasks. You learned to navigate the world through trial, error, and physical presence. Then, the algorithm arrived. The primary goal of an algorithm is to remove friction. It wants to give you what you want before you even know you want it. It removes the weight. It removes the effort. But for the Xennial brain, which was neurologically optimized for friction during its developmental window, this ease feels like a form of sensory deprivation. It's actually the evolution of the behavior we discussed in the Older Than You Are video, that feeling of being Neo in the Matrix that several of you mentioned in the comments. You can see the code, but your body is still looking for the wooden bricks and mortar of the analog world. In the before times, you had a high internal locus of control. You were the search engine. You were the GPS. You were the curator of your own personality. You found a band because you saw someone wearing their shirt, not because a Discover Weekly playlist told you that you'd like them based on your metadata. When the algorithm took over, it flipped that locus to the outside. Now, your preferences are suggested to you. Your social interactions are ranked for you. For a generation that spent 20 years being its own navigator, this feels like being a passenger in a car where the driver refuses to tell you where you're going. This is where that Xennial rage comes from that I saw in so many of your comments. It's not that you're anti-tech. Some of you are electricians, IT pros, and doctors. It's that you remember the feeling of information sovereignty. You remember when you owned your thoughts, rather than your thoughts being a data point for a server in Northern Virginia. Here is something almost nobody talks about: proprioceptive memory. This is your brain's ability to remember things through physical space and touch. Xennials are the last generation to have their memory palaces built out of physical objects. You remember where a specific fact was because you remember the weight of the encyclopedia volume in your hands. You remember a phone number because your fingers remember the dance they did on a keypad or a rotary dial. When everything moved behind a glass screen, that physical anchor vanished. Now, every task looks the same. Booking a flight, grieving a loss, and buying a spatula all involve the same physical action: tapping a piece of glass. This creates a psychological phenomenon called semantic flattening. Because the physical effort required for a big life event is now the same as a small one, your brain struggles to assign the proper emotional weight to your experiences. This is why you're exhausted. Your brain is trying to use a 3-dimensional operating system to navigate a 2-dimensional world. One of the most resonant points from our last conversation was the safety of forgetting. Someone in the comments mentioned they miss the safety of forgetting because everything feels permanent now. But there's a deeper psychological layer to this. It's about the social feedback loop. Before algorithms, if you did something embarrassing at a party in 1996, it lived in the memories of 10 people. It had a half-life. It eventually decayed and disappeared. This allowed for psychological plasticity. the ability to change who you are because your past wasn't constantly being shoved in your face by a memory notification. Today, the algorithm doesn't let you evolve. It categorizes you. If you click on one specific type of content, it decides that is who you are and feeds you more of it. It traps you in a static version of yourself. For Xennials, who spent their formative years in a state of constant, unrecorded flux, this feels like being pinned to a board like a butterfly in a museum. You're being watched by a system that doesn't understand context, only engagement. But let's talk about the silver lining. Because you grew up before the feed, you have a baseline reality that younger generations are currently paying thousands of dollars in therapy to try and find. You have a dorsal vagal state, a physiological off switch that was hardwired into you by those thousands of hours of 1980s boredom. You know that the world doesn't end if your battery dies. You know that a person's online persona is a performance, not a person. Because you remember when reputation was built through years of face-to-face consistency, not a viral post. You are the only ones who can tell the difference between meaning and metrics. In my previous videos, many of you said you feel like a fossil or an outlier, but I want to propose a different label. You aren't outdated, you're calibrated. You are the only people on the planet who have a control group for what it means to be human. You know what the water looks like because you remember being dry. This leaves you in a very strange position. You're the one taking care of parents who still think the cloud is a physical place, while simultaneously raising kids who think a dial tone is a glitch. You've become the permanent, unpaid IT department for everyone in your life, the cultural translator constantly switching between two languages of intent. But there's a quiet power in that friction. When you find yourself reaching for a yellow legal pad instead of a notes app, it isn't a rejection of the future. It's a biological reflex. It's your brain remembering that your life doesn't require a subscription to function. It's a reminder that you carry a version of humanity that doesn't need a signal to exist. You feel older because you're carrying the weight of a transition that changed the chemistry of human attention. But that weight is actually a rare form of psychological stamina. You're the person who can sit in a room without a device and not feel like a piece of your identity is missing. You know that silence isn't a malfunction, it's just the space where you've always been most yourself. If you've made it this far, it's because your brain still remembers how to focus. I've read your comments, and I hear you. We're going to keep diving into these hidden corners together. Subscribe, stay curious, and remember, you aren't lost in the algorithm. You're the one who knows the way out. Thank you for watching, and if this connected with you, I think the two videos on your screen right now will speak to you as well. I'll see you in the next one.